Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for attending. This is our third series in Empire Builders webinar series. We did one back in September and another one in May. So we do them every few months. So for those of you who have attended before, hopefully you get some new information out of this. And for those of you that are new, welcome. Thanks for spending an hour of your time with us, and hopefully you get some good insights from the conversation today. While we get started, I did want to, I think a lot of you on this list are familiar with ApplePie Capital, but just a quick summary of who we are and why we put this webinar on quarterly. ApplePie Capital is a primarily franchise-focused lender. We've secured a little over $2.8 billion in loans to over 200 brands over the last 10 years. So we're dedicated to franchising only. Our team, our relationship managers, they understand your brand, the lending environment, and it's a very one-on-one experience that you'll get. We've got anything from equipment financing, new units, acquisitions, relocations, refinances, essentially all of your franchising finance needs we can help you with. We have a conventional loan product we do through ApplePie Capital, our core loan. And we also have a broker side of our business. So we use our network of SBA lenders to help with that side of the business as well. So just wanted to give you a quick bit of information about who we are and why we're here. And now we can get started with the reason why you're all here and the topics of conversation at hand. We do have, I'll introduce myself to start. I'm Samantha Holt. I am the sales operations manager at ApplePie. I've been here since 2017. I manage just general sales operations and our team of relationship managers as well. We do have one missing guest today. Bill is here, unfortunately can't make it today. So he had something unexpected come up. He is a very valuable client of ours, and so we were hoping he could share some of his insights, but he's a busy guy. So we will not have him today, unfortunately, but we do have Jiger Patel, who is very experienced. He's a multi-unit franchisee in several brands, Qdoba, Dave's Hot Chicken, Checkers, and the Green Turtle. He's got over 40 units across 4 brands and decades of experience. So I think we will have plenty to talk about with him. And given his operations, I know that this is his time is very valuable, so we appreciate him spending this next hour with us. So thank you. Jiger, is there anything else you want to say about yourself?
No, I'm happy to be here. Any value I can add to fellow entrepreneurs. Really happy and excited to be part of this panel.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so, in this call, there's a lot of things that we can talk about when it comes to scaling your franchise business. We talk a lot about capital, right? We talk about financing, so financial capital and human capital. Starting on the financing side of things, with the number of units that you have now, I'd imagine that the way you approach financing has changed quite a bit from when you were first starting out, maybe units 1 through 10, just trying to sort of accelerate your growth in that time period. How did you approach financing in the earlier days, and what did you look for, and what are the things that you tried to avoid during that time?
Honestly, it wasn't much of a choice in my early days. When I started my career, we kind of got our hands on anything and we were pursuing to close those deals. Not that desperately, but starting your business venture, I think the right start is through SBA. SBA gives you the cleanest entry into small businesses. Government has put up a very nice program that you can leverage to get yourself established and get yourself going in the business. But once you get going with the business, SBA does come with its own caveats. Some compliance issues, higher interest rate, much more favorable long-term debt financing, and a limit of $5 million. So, I mean, it kind of gets you a good foundation to get you going. But at some point, you have to start building a relationship with traditional, conventional lenders and start working on those angles. So early days, I did start with SBA a little bit, but I very quickly pivoted from SBA and moved on to something traditional conventional lenders like ApplePie.
Sure. Did you find it easy to graduate from SBA as far as like, let's say you had an SBA loan on your first few units, were there any, was there anything restrictive or any roadblocks that where you found it hard to grow because of those loans? Or did you find it like this was a good temporary solution and you were able to just kind of move past that option?
I think SBA is a very easy way of getting funding done. I'm going to be very candid with this. Like, the traditional bankers, you have to build a report, you got to have a resume, you got to have experience and a lot of relationship before they will touch your lending, or they want to touch just the tier one brands. So if you're going in through tier two or tier three brands, I think SBA is a, but if you are entering through the tier one brands, I don't think you need SBA. There are a lot of traditional lenders that will lend you money on that.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. When it comes to the type of growth that you've done, I know you've got experience with both developing units and also quite a few acquisitions. I know you said you generally prefer acquisitions. Can you give us some insight on what you look for when buying existing units and what you try to avoid?
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity, there is a great opportunity in acquisition. There are a lot of buyers who will buy at premium. I'm not one of those buyers. I will buy at a acquisitions. We at any given time, we are always scouting out new opportunities and new acquisition opportunities to go along with that. That doesn't mean that we're gonna settle on all or any of them. It's just making sure the numbers make sense. There is a protection of a downside, and there is a very high potential of upside based on your operating skills and the team what you have to support those operations take post acquisition. So when we're buying for looking for really strategically value add proposition that we have a lot of upside to it, and that's what I kind of play in right now. Once you get to a certain level, you can take a stab at tier one brands or those kind of high valuation approach of business. Now, if something goes wrong, now you have strong enough portfolio to support the downturn of those potential downturns of economic uncertainties as you face, and you have no idea what's going to happen in future. So you have to be very methodical on what you're looking at, where you uh, not necessarily pursue the tier one brands on like high valuation. Has to be well balanced approach that you can meet your covenants with loan, and there is a plenty of cash flow left behind that.
I see. So yeah, you approach it in an opportunistic way. You want to see that there's room for growth, but you don't have you had any experience with severely underperforming units, or is it generally sort of those middle of the road cash flowing units that you're looking for where there's an upside to
So,
growth?
so when you looking at acquisitions, they're not every units are going to be performing or every unit's not going to be excelling. So it's a good mix of units that you're acquiring. So if you're buying, let's say, 10 unit deal, there has to be like, 1/3 of that has to be strong performer, 1/3 has to be really poorly performed, which has a very high, is the middle of the pack that you just give a little TLC and a little low onto it becomes like, easily profitable. So those are the kind of balanced
Yeah,
portfolios that we focus on rather than just looking at portfolios which are like severely underperforming or severely like excelling at their operational matrix.
understood. Makes sense. Um, so shifting gears a little bit to the operations side, right? Because there's figuring out how to grow successfully and how to get to your desired number of units, whatever that number is. But as you know, it's not as easy as just, smooth sailing, right? You get to your desired number of units and you're just sitting there collecting a check. There's the more important element of making sure your operations are solid, that you have the right people in the right places to create something sustainable. So I'm curious how you, with the number of units that you have, what are some things you've done over time to build consistent operations and best practices that you use every day?
Well, planning ahead of time is a short answer. If you're working for growth, just like you invest into your business, your capital, you have to invest into your human capital too. You got to build a team before you start the growth. You cannot wait till the need arises and then you start building a team. You're always going to fall behind on those areas. So I am a very firm believer of investing heavily on my leadership team and the supports team what we build. Currently, we operate 41 units, and out of 41 units, the team what I have in place is easily able to support double the size, given our trajectory and what we have planned out for over the next 2.5 years, the growth what we have in pipeline. I am well equipped to take on that growth with the existing infrastructure what we have in place, but I'm already looking ahead and building the team for the future growth, what 5 years from now, where the need's going to be. And we like just long-term planning and don't shy away from investing into the right talent. That is the essential part of the growth. If you don't have the right talent, no matter how hard you keep trying and just growing, it there are very high chances of those system collapsing, or you will get staggered at a certain point that you won't be able to grow past that.
Sure. How do you motivate the people that you put in place that you trust? Your district managers and your VPs of operations, those people, how do you keep them motivated and trust that they have a pulse on what's going on at the unit level? What kind of involvement do you have, and how does that bubble up to, how does what they're doing each day bubble up to you in an efficient way, so you kind of know what's going on?
And we have a ongoing communication matrix what we have established over the course of time, and we are always evolving that communication. But on top of that, it starts from the culture and core values of the enterprise. You have to have values, and you have to have culture built within that. Like our core values were established in 2015. It took us 3 months of brainstorming, trying to figure out who we are, what we love to do, and what we want to get into. So the establishment of my company was in 2015, TIG as it stands right now. I've been in business for 25 years, but like the existing enterprise was established in 2015. It was based on like customers, integrity, culture, environment, community, and profits are last part of it. So I mean, we are in for profit, but that is not what the driver is to drive the company. I mean, we focus on our customers. We are in guest service relationship business. We have to focus on our guests, make sure they are taken care of. Integrity, like be honest to each other, your partners, your employee. Be fair, honor our commitments. Like, there are a lot of thought put behind that, and those are the cultural values that we uh, kind of interpret in our daily lives and practice in our doing our work, and that is been trickled down through our entire team. That kind of helps us build the right minded leaders. Along with that, we are a growth company, so to be part of the growth company, you naturally attract a lot of good talent. You just have to invest in that good talent at the right time and make sure they don't go away, and like give them a career path of growth to go along with that.
Right. Have you had a hard time at finding the just the hourly employees? I know a lot of restaurants have struggled with that since COVID. Have you seen that a lot in the areas that you're in, or has it subsided a little bit
Absolutely,
since
we
2020,
have.
2021?
We are not immune to those troubles that market faces. I mean, 2021, 2022 was a time that we took all guards off. Like, bring me bodies, whatever it takes. There is no pay restriction. There are none of those things were in play. At any cost, anybody walks in, just hire them. Like, we were at that stage. At our lowest point, we were staffed under 60% of what our needs are. And it was really hard to manage at that time. Luckily, the teenagers came to rescue at that time, those couple summers, and it kind of gave us a good stability. Uh, right now we are close to like 95% staff level, and I think it's a good balance. The pendulum has shifted to employer side from employee side. It's a cycle that you have to face and go through. And right now, I don't see that kind of trouble. I mean, there are like particular location may have troubles here and there, but overall, grand scheme of things, I think things are working very smoothly right now. The labor market is pretty fair. There are a lot of jobs out there, and people are seeking jobs. And I see that even getting better
Got it.
for 2025.
Yeah, it seems from what we're hearing that it's improving, but it is still pretty sporadic. So I was just curious how, if you guys had gotten to the other side of that yet.
I mean, right now we have a
Um,
restaurant opening up tomorrow. And I had to delay opening by 1 week because we couldn't hire enough bodies. And the reason for that is not because we are opening in the proximity of the mall. And even this holiday season, the mall and big boxes are hiring like there is no tomorrow, and they have head start on hiring since like October, November. So that kind of throws us off. So, I mean, something new that we learned, we did not anticipate we will have this kind of challenges. But lesson learned is like, if you're opening around Christmas time, make sure not, if it's around mall, adjust your dates and timelines or.
sure. Yeah, lesson learned. That makes sense. Hopefully the business will come.
Yep.
Based on the timing. So I know you've got several units in development at the moment. How are you managing the cost increases that everybody's seeing on both the build out and the cost of goods side of things, from overpaying employees just to kind of keep them, or just, inventory and cost of goods increasing from what it used to be? But specifically like the build out costs, how are you hedging that, and how does that impact your development?
Pre-COVID and post-COVID, the cost inflation is roughly 35%. Uh, at at its peak. Right now, we are able to get it around 20-25% over pre-COVID levels, with a lot of efficiencies within my team. And we also work very closely with franchisors and their supply chain team to pre-negotiate the contracts, which helps franchisees in readily negotiated agreements, that we don't have to go and try to find better pricing. So we work very closely with the franchisor itself because they have a larger infrastructure and support team that they can help us negotiate a better contracts and pricing with a lot of vendors. And it's constant renegotiation, doing many RFIs and like RFPs, and like, we're trying to get information with multiple vendors, locking down the pricing at much better favorable rates and trying to bring those costs down. Construction side, we team up with general contractors and negotiate pass-through rates. It's not easy to negotiate those things. The sheer amount of work we give the contractors, we can negotiate a lot of those rates that, like, their markup is pass-through plus whatever X percentages. So there is like a clear black and white communication on it. Like, there is no ambiguity behind what the costs are. Going with the landlords, trying to push a lot of the work on landlords, because the commercial market right now is very tight in landlord favors. They want to charge you premium rents. Obviously, you will wind up paying the premium rents regardless of what it is. Try to get the best buck out of it. Like, give them, negotiate some work letter, the items which out of your leasehold improvement construction that you're improving into their building, pass it on to the landlord side. Have them do some of the work that eases your pressure on those things. Negotiate the tenant improvement allowances, which helps you with some of the returns on your cash. There are a lot of tactics we implement to bring the cost down. On top of that, I have my own team within facilities and project management that we run from within my infrastructure support team. That also does pre-negotiated contracts and agreements, constantly working out ways to be more efficient and save money.
Got it. You mentioned tenant improvement allowances. How do you, is there anything changing with how you approach those? Are you looking for you know, the highest dollar amount? Do you sometimes, you mentioned higher rent, do you sometimes sort of choose some landlords will trade in lower rent for a period of time in lieu of tenant improvement allowance? Do you have a preference either way when it comes to that, or what's your strategy on that side of things?
It's a very tricky balance that we have to work. Like it works on multiple angle. So getting more dollars from
Yeah.
landlords will gladly pay up as long as their balance sheets are strong, because now they're gonna amortize it over 10 years and reap the benefits of it for 20, 30 years of that rent. So you have to be very careful how much TI, what you taking on, and how much you're buying up the rent with. Along with, even if you are able to, sometimes you want to be very careful with the lease adjusted leverages that a lot of business owners don't even look at it. Like, if we look at it like, now, what is our debt to credit ratio? What is our covenants ratio? What is our EBITDA multiplier that we are leveraging? Those things, if you really want to scale, you want to focus on lease adjusted leverage, LAL. And that's where it gets tricky if you pay higher rents. Although your enterprise might be very well profitable, but if you are not focused, looking at your lease adjusted leverage very closely, your growth will like stop. Banks will not fund over certain threshold on those lease adjusted leverage. You will hit every parameters to get funding, qualify for everything, but that's where you get stuck with by paying higher rent. So it's a very tricky proposition. Like, how do you balance that out? Like, you have to have the right projected revenue, what percentage rent of that needs to be within a certain percentage, and how much of that you can buy up or buy down.
Makes sense. Thank you for that insight. I know that's that's a, I don't want to say touchy subject, but that can get confusing for people. And sometimes you just see dollar signs, so you just want to make sure you're
Yep.
considering all of the facts. You're in multiple brands at this point, but what are the things sort of early on and even now still, what do you consider when choosing the brands to get into, and how do you go about doing the research and understanding the brand?
Yeah, I mean,
before you commit to it?
Yeah, so we look at the segments, or like fast food, fast casual, and casual dining. I'm in all three segments right now. And we are constantly exploring additional brands and additional verticals. So like, exclusive, every brand has exclusive. So if I'm in a fast food like burger brand, I cannot do any burger. So whenever you pick your burger brand, you got to be very careful, mindful of it, that it's the right brand. When it comes to Mexican, Qdoba in particular, we've been following Qdoba since 2015. That was one of the brands that we started following since we formed this company. It was under different ownership. We knew what kind of potential this brand had, what kind of love factor the brand had back in days, and like what was the right time to get in. So we constantly speak to the franchisees, follow the brand, their FDDs, speak to stay in contact with the leadership team to see where the brand's vision and goals are for the future. About in 2019, we felt comfortable approaching the brand and being part of the brand. So in 2019, we started negotiations, and in 2020, right during COVID, we signed some deals. In like prime, like right in middle of the COVID, when everything was shut down, we signed the deals. And honestly, those were the most favorable deals I ever signed in my life. So it's no such
during your whiskey time.
Yeah, like don't fall in love with the brand, right? I mean, I have made those mistakes in my life. I have fell in love with the brand, and just because I love the food, I got into it. Luckily, it worked out for me, but that's not the right way of approaching this business. Like, you have to be very methodical. Like, what is how the lenders are rating the brand. You have to know, like, if this brand is bankable or not. Are you going to get funding done for your growth with this brand? What is the growth trajectory this brand is past 5, 7, 10 years? Like, how is it performing over the past 5 years, and how is it going to perform in future? There are a lot of things we look at it, and the best insight you get out of is like speaking with franchisees who've been in the system for 10 plus years. Like you will always find legacy franchisees who have been in system for 5, 10 years. Speak to those franchisees. You know, if you speak to five, there are two franchises going to open up and give you right information. Like, don't just give up by like if you can't get in touch with it. Like, speak to the other fellow franchisees and they will give you the much needed information which will help you decide if it's the right brand for you or not.
Right, leveraging the franchise community, which is a lot smaller than it seems, a lot more
Yes,
tight-knit than you would imagine.
absolutely.
Do you ever lean on your bank or your lending partners for advice in that? Like if you're considering a brand that maybe is somewhat emerging or just it isn't one of those like top tier brands that everyone's familiar with, do you rely on them at all for advice on that side of things?
I do. I do consult with my trusted partners. We call our lending partners our partners, right? Like, I'm constantly in communication with talk about like, what are the A-rated brands that my bankers are working with, right? What is on their preferred lending
Mhm.
list of the brands. And we are constantly talking about that. We go to trade shows, try to get understanding of the different brands. Uh, there are a lot of sources, a lot of ways to gain this information. It's like not like one place that we get this information, gather this information from.
Yep. I'm going to turn off my camera for this, guys, because my connection's really bad sometimes. So sorry to go off camera, but I want to make sure I'm hearing everything you're saying. Can you hear me okay now, Jiger?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. My internet decides to be finicky at the perfect time. Um, on the brand topic one more time, I think, so maybe sometimes some of the time post-COVID, I think we saw this, but just in economic cycles, there's like desired industries or brands, and then there's ones that aren't. And some industries banks will look at as, maybe recession proof or something like that. Have you ever been in a brand where you were having a really hard time getting financing because of either the brand itself, the industry that it was in, or just the economic cycle that we were experiencing? And if so, how did you approach that? Like what sort of information did you find valuable to give to your lender, and what are the sort of things that you had to do differently to go about financing during that time?
I mean, if banks say no to the financing, honestly, you shouldn't get the funding done. At that time, you're over leveraging. There are some numbers which are not working, that you are not able to see that in all fairness. You have to reevaluate your numbers. If you have to pause the growth, we have to pause the growth. I have done that many times. But in the case of like, don't push the deal through just because you feel it's the right deal. If the numbers don't make sense, there is like 80, 90% chance they don't. You're not missing anything on it.
Right.
Like, you're taking much more risk for very little reward opportunity on it. So be very careful uh, in those scenarios, especially when it comes to the brand, which are non-fundable. Like, I've been in a situation, uh, let's say Green Turtle as an example. We were in process of acquiring 2 units, and the agreements were signed, but the banks were just not willing to fund it because the brand did not have the presence or the credit worthiness did not meet the credit worthiness. That doesn't mean the restaurants were not profitable, but you just have to find other opportunities, other ways, other options to do that. So we had to do some PE funds, like, hey, we got together with some friends, like, look, there's a great opportunity and I think you should invest with us. And there are other ways, alternative ways that you have to overcome those areas. That doesn't mean you give up on the deals if you truly believe on it, but like don't just try to push the deal through with your gut feeling. The numbers has to justify for you to do. So
Yeah.
I mean, there are many lenders. You don't want to just get stuck with one lender. Although I'm speaking in front of ApplePie, but for as a business practice, you should be negotiating with multiple bankers.
Definitely. Yep. So there's some people that that take, like, they're motivated by the no's, right? Like they get 5, 6, 7 no's, and it's like fuel to keep them going. And so they keep pushing, which is good. I think you have to have that level of ambition if you're going to be an entrepreneur. But sounds like you're saying have plan A, plan B, and maybe even plan C, but also know when to take a pause if it's not feeling right, or there's factors at play that you're not going to be able to open it the way that you want. It's okay to take a break instead of forcing it, especially if you don't have either the cash reserves or like those contingency plans to get it done no matter what.
100% agree. I mean, like we have our internal thresholds that we have established based on the EBITDA. Like, we cannot leverage more than certain X of our EBITDA. We cannot leverage more than certain X of our EBITDA, and we cannot leverage more than certain X of our lease adjusted leverage. Those parameters and checks are put in place so that way we don't over leverage our enterprise and potentially jeopardize the future for the whole company. And
Yeah.
we have to have some disciplines on it. If you have $5 million to invest it wisely. Don't, just because you can get $10 million, that doesn't mean you just take on that debt and not be comfortable with it. Just take what your system and your company can support. Don't just take because you're getting it.
Right. Well, and you mentioned something that is important, I think, to stay close to your global numbers and all your key ratios. I mean, you could have covenants that are impacted, and just what you want your return to be, right? So just letting the numbers make the decisions for you versus your gut feeling or your other motivating factors, or whatever agreement you signed with the brand saying you have to open within this time frame. If the numbers don't make sense, kind of letting that be the driving decision making factor.
Absolutely. One thing to add while we are talking about that, whenever you're negotiating a entry into franchise agreements, be sure to read the franchise agreements, what you're signing up for, and negotiate those things. Franchisors will negotiate those agreements. Some of the key items you do want to look at is cross default. Do not sign off on a cross default if you're going to be multi-unit franchisee. Because if you have a cross default provision in it, the franchisor can default you throughout your enterprise if your one location go bad.
Wow. That's good advice.
Same thing goes
Yeah,
with the
we
banks.
have,
Obviously, we don't allow banks to cross default the notes as well. So I mean, we negotiate those things with bank as well.
yeah, that's great advice. Thanks for pointing that out. So we talked a lot about specifics. These are more sort of general questions when it comes to like best and worst thing that you've done, right? Out of all your experience, if maybe you don't view them as mistakes, maybe you view them as learning experiences, which is the glass half full way of looking at things. But is there one thing that stands out that you're like, gosh, I wish this was a good learning experience, a big mistake I made, and it really sort of changed the trajectory of things, where I would tell people, make sure you don't make this mistake, or make sure you pay attention to this one thing.
One thing I will say is like, don't do like any transactions or business deals in the name of trust. That has backfired. That was the biggest learning I have established. I mean, one will say like, why would you do business in the name of trust? But you get so comfortable with certain individuals, like you start trusting the people, personnel, and like just don't get into any kind of business transactions in the name of trust. The second thing is some of the best decisions I have made in my life are in the time of uncertainty. When the whole world is uncertain, I go out and try to find opportunities behind those uncertainties, and it has served me very well throughout my life. So just like don't get boggled or bottlenecked with like the problems which you're facing. Solve those problems and find the opportunities behind those hidden behind those problems once you solve it.
Great advice. This is sort of the opposite of this question, and I think you kind of answered it, so it might be a similar answer. But when we talked earlier this week, I liked your perspective on this when I asked, what's the best decision you've made in your franchise journey? And I liked your answer. So I'd love for you to share it with the group.
Yeah, the best decision I made in my franchise journey is I teamed with my friends. In 2015, when I from TIG, I did team up with two of my very good friends, longtime friends. We've been friends for 20 plus years now. Uh, I had a very good career. I've been franchising for 15 years at that time, or 14 years at that time, when we formed TIG. Always been like, 3, 5, 10 units, 3, 5, 10 units, but never really figured out a way to crack the code. And obviously learned that I had some deficiencies in my way of approaching things. So what I learned is I learned to let go, to grow, and trusted my partners who I teamed up with, and they complemented my deficiencies, what I had, which is my infrastructure support needs and planning and relationship and marketing side. So that was one of the best decisions I made in my franchise journey, that teaming up with my friends, chose the right partners which complemented each other.
Yeah, and you mentioned not to do business in just based on trust. But obviously you trust your friends, but I'm sure that aside from that, you had rock solid operating agreements and things like that that protected that relationship, right? Where you're not just, it's not a handshake.
Agreements that it took 6 months in drafting.
Yeah.
That was drafted in 2015. We have never opened that up again ever since. It was
Well,
drafted.
that's
It's there. There are documents to protect everybody's interest.
perfect. Yeah, that makes it, that's the best way to do it. We have a question from the chat, from Michael Klein, one of our attendees. I'll read it. It says, Jiger recommended not to sign a franchise agreement that includes a cross default. My franchisor is pushing back on the removal of cross default provisions, saying that it helps the franchisor remove bad actors within the system. If you intend to be successful, a successful franchisee performing good business, it serves the system to be able to remove the bad actors. How would you respond to this?
It's a business case, and honestly, it's more of like, a business case that you have to plead with your franchisor, and rather than you driving that conversation, your attorney needs to drive the conversation to make the points. There are a lot of I'm not an attorney to give legal advice. There are ways to work around it, but I think the legal approach, having to have that conversation through attorney, will go long ways. If you're going to tier one brands, uh, you're probably right. You're not going to get away with it. But tier two and tier three brands, there are very likely, highly likelihood scenarios that you will get away with it. They will work with you.
Awesome.
I hope
Thank
I
you.
answered the question. And
Yep, I don't see another response, so we'll keep you posted. We don't have any other questions in the chat. And we've sort of covered all the ground that we plan to cover in this webinar. Since we're down one panelist, I kind of had an inkling that it would end a little bit early. I'll hang out, just for a few minutes in case people have questions and they were saving them to the end. We'll keep an eye on that. Oh, there's one that's coming through. One of our guests wants to know, what do you consider tier one or tier two franchises? How do you classify that?
the McDonald's, Taco Bell, Dunkin', to give you some examples, are tier one brands. I would say tier two will be at one point Burger King was tier one, but Burger King now considers tier two brand. Tier two will be the brand which has the tier one brands will be any brands which has over 2,000 restaurants and has a national presence. Tier two will be roughly, this is my estimation, between 500 to 1,500 units is tier two, and any brand which is under 500 units are considered tier three brands, still growing. That's how we look at it. I don't know how industry sees it, and that's how most of the banks and lenders will look at it as well.
Yeah, good question. And I think you mentioned this when we were speaking yesterday too, that even when you're in the early stages of your growth phase, that Sometimes it's beneficial to choose, not to say that tier 1, 2, and 3 is in a bad way, that sometimes it's beneficial to choose some of the emerging brands, as long as there's enough data to kind of understand what you're getting into. So brands that are around 100 to 200 units, as an example. Is there anything you would avoid there, or things that just to be careful of or cognizant of if you're in one of those emerging brands, and how would you approach those brands?
Yeah. So, I mean, tier 1 brands for newcomers is going to be practically impossible to get into unless you come with a very robust background and resume. Tier 1 brands will not touch you if that's not happening. Tier 2 brand is where you should focus on, in all fairness, if you get in. But tier 3 brands are not to write them off. Like, there are certain brands which has a very good, robust regional presence in their home turfs, home markets. And if you're growing those brands within those markets where the brand has a presence, those are the opportunities I would find to get into business. They are easy to get in. The brands are very well diverse to get you in. Like, they will work with you to support you in many ways. Their entry points are not super expensive. Building a tier 3 brand may cost you $500,000 versus tier 1 brand, which will cost you north of $2 million. And tier 2 will cost you roughly about $1 million. I'm just giving you hypothetical estimates. It's not just like, how it works in reality, but that's typically how it works. And it could be a good ROI, investing in tier 3 brands, get your learnings in, limit your exposure, and there's still a growth opportunity within those brands. You just have to identify those brands within your markets where you are and see if banks will willing to fund those brands.
Yeah, and that's great. Going into the good advice there, I think, too, is going into those brands, are going into the market where there's proven success versus entering a new territory without a lot of
Yeah,
data.
you don't want to get into tier 3 brands and take them out of their home turf. The likelihood of that working out is very low. I have seen a lot of fellow entrepreneurs and franchisees have taken that, like, hey, I was traveling to, let's say, Florida, and I saw some certain brand which works in Florida, El Pollo Loco, as an example, and you want to bring that into Northeast. It may not work. Highly likely that it's not going to work. There are Tijuana Flats came in from Florida. They have a very strong hold in Florida. That now they came in. They try to penetrate in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. The franchises went out because brand has no presence whatsoever.
Right. Lots more questions coming in. One is, how did you start your first location? Did you get a loan for the very first location?
My father signed off on my note on my first location as a guarantor. That was my first start. Obviously, you will need some support. It's not impossible, but it's not cakewalk as well. Like, it's not super easy. You have to work hard for it. You got to show some capital. You got to have experience. Banks want to see your resume. You have to understand the business, and you can go SBA route and you can get funding. But you have to have a good business plan and solid resume to get funding done.
Yep.
It is pretty easy to get SBA funding done these days. I wish I knew that when I started.
Yes.
I didn't know those things. An immigrant moved from India and started doing this. It was an easy transition for me. Luckily, I surrounded myself with very supportive people who guided me in the right direction, sort of.
Yeah. We see a lot of that. So that's definitely a good way to get started. As you said, you need support. That's for sure, wherever you can get it.
You gotta have trusted partners around you.
Absolutely. Another question in regards to acquisitions. What are your recommended tips and tricks for deal sourcing for acquisition opportunities? Says obviously you can network within the brand once you're in, but curious if you use a business broker or other means.
But my acquisitions are very rarely through business brokers. Once the package goes to the business broker, that's not the valuation you want to pay. So bulk of the acquisitions that we work on is through the brand interconnection over the 20 plus years. Go to a lot of conference, I know a lot of people. We have very good report that we have built, and that's what you need to focus on if you want to get some value added acquisition opportunities. Once it hits the market, it's like the chances of that happening are very low.
That's great advice. Lots of acquisition questions, so I'm gonna just keep on that topic. Another one is, do you have a database to refer to when knowing the appropriate multiple used for the acquisition price? Any recommendations on negotiating acquisition price?
Start low, but at least don't start low that it's insulting. Speak to your bankers. They know what multiple certain brands are trading at. If you have a good relationship with the bankers will tell you they have a database that they can share with you that which is not shared to greater public. That what is a multiple? Speak to the franchisees within those brands, random franchises. They know that enterprise value, what the multiple is. Typically, the brands will trade from 3 to 10x of EBITDA. It goes back to what tier brand it is, or there is also a lot of variations or variables on that, how high your revenues are, because the higher the revenue, the higher premium you're going to have to pay, because the flow through is much greater on those higher revenue restaurants compared to the national averages for the brand.
Yep. Yeah, that's great advice. And I think most banks will, regardless of brand, tend to want to be around 5 times or lower leverage. So you can consider that in the purchase price.
Banks will do deals at 3x all day, every day. None of my deals are more than 5x. When I'm buying, when I'm selling, they're not less than 7x.
Yep, that is the
I've been
strategy.
very candid with this. Look, I buy low, sell high. But I give them something that they can just it's on autopilot. The whole infrastructure, everything has been made, and that's where the value add comes in when I ask for premium, when I'm selling. It comes with a support structure.
Yep. Okay, we've got a few more. We've got about 11 minutes left. So one question is, what's an acceptable rent adjusted leverage ratio? How is it calculated? Putting you on the spot there.
It's okay. The lease adjusted leverage is calculated 3 different ways. There are banks will calculate that on multiple of your rent. What is the right way of explaining this? It's a very complex calculation. It took me a while to figure these things out too when I started understanding this. So there is a formula you will find, some kind of theoretical formulas you will find on the website. And working with your bankers can help you fine tune that. But typically the way it works is their banks have different ways of calculating. Typical and most conservative ways, like take the rent, multiply that by 6 times, and there's a special division you have to make with the EBITDA. And as long as you're under 5 times of that multiple, 5x, you're looked at much more favorably on those areas. I wish I could share that if I had some calculations right now, but I currently don't. So you take your occupation cost, add that into EBITDA and multiply that, and then divide by the rent threshold.
Yeah, and it is true. It can be calculated or interpreted somewhat differently depending on the bank. If you're looking for a lender that's measuring it or wanting to make sure that you're financeable. So that would be a good place to start. We could probably send a general calculation. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we could send that.
And theoretically, that kind of falls in play really once you go past 10 units. Up until then, banks are not that much keen on to measuring those things. It's mainly on projections and EBITDA multiple. But once you go past a certain leverage and certain unit count, that is an added layer of protection that you want to look at it. Especially the market conditions could change, your revenues could go up and down, and your rent number does not change. It constantly keeps going up. And that is the reason that calculation comes in a very, very handy way.
Yes. Absolutely. This one is switching gears a little bit. If you have a high interest loan, what is the earliest time to try to refinance? I can answer that, or you can answer that, Jiger, if you
No,
have.
please go ahead. I've been talking. Let's.
This is more of a lender question, so I give you a break to take a drink of water. I think that in general, refinancing, most lenders want to see at minimum 12 months of solid cash flow. Aside from that, it's more about making sure that you can support the new debt, which if you have high interest rate and you're making those payments, then you should be in good shape. But they just want to see consistency. They want to see a good trailing 12 months. They want to see that you know your numbers, and expect some questions from them on what caused you to take that debt in the first place, right? You might get some speculation on that. So I would just say be prepared to discuss your business operations, and they'd ideally like to see stability, and preferably positive trends. But at minimum, you want a good 12 months of cash flow in a positive direction. Okay, in the early days, SBA requires you to sign personal assets as collateral. As you scale, do you recommend to jump to private investors ASAP that will use your business itself as collateral? At what point were you able to separate your business from personal collateral? What are your key hurdles and learnings along that journey?
SBA, I will walk away from SBA the first. Make you write your personal guarantee and everything you own in your life as a guarantee. SBA is not likely to work easily with you if there is ever some turbulence within your business. The traditional lender will work very closely with you because you have a human body that you're working with, relationship manager you're working with. SBA is all government bureaucracies that's going to drag you down and ruin you. So if it ever comes to the point, SBA is not its easiest route to get in, but I would run away from as quickly as we can. The hurdles are pretty standard, like the guarantees. We don't do SBA debt anymore. There are certain programs that you can explore with SBA. We can still explore and qualify, but like we stay away from SBA. I kind of missed the questions. Hopefully, I answered that.
Yeah, I think you answered most of it. I think I'll clarify a little bit too, if I'm reading between the lines on the question. I think it's important to know that a lot of lenders that are non-SBA still require a personal guarantee, but not necessarily your personal assets as collateral, meaning they're not going to actually place a lien on your home or any of your other personal assets. But you typically do still sign a personal guarantee until you get to a certain point of your growth. The bigger you get, then you might find lenders who are willing to forego that or to have it for a shorter period of time. But anywhere between at least unit 1 to unit 15, you're probably going to be signing a personal guarantee, generally speaking, depending on the lender, if you're looking at traditional banks versus like, private equity or private investors. But depending on the brand, you can refinance out of SBA pretty easily after you've got some proven operations in the brand that you're in. Hopefully that helps. Okay, I think we have time for one more, and then just to make sure we're not shorting anybody. Let me just try to find one they're all really great questions. We'll try to answer these after. We'll send some email answers. Will the banks let you leverage your first location to fund your next, or would you still recommend SBA as you start to scale?
You can answer that, but I'll give you my take on it real quick. I would always leverage my first business before I go to SBA. So if you have a enterprise which has a value, and if you can justify to the bank, I would do recapitalization of those assets and use that capital at your desire rather than going to bank and trying to do a SBA loan. So ApplePie does very good job on that particular scenario. Most of my funding done through ApplePie is a recap of my existing assets that I don't have to answer to ApplePie. ApplePie already knows, or any bank will know that I will meet my covenants because those are operating assets. And I will leverage those operating assets so I don't have to worry about like all of my covenants are not to worry about like, a new restaurant could take 6 months or 12 months to get up to the speed to be more profitable. So leveraging your existing assets is more my preferred way of taking on more debt rather than going on projection base or SBA.
Yeah, definitely. And ApplePie, to Jiger's point, we will do that up to 4.5 times EBITDA. So if you've got the equity in your business, then we can do a recap loan to get you cash out for a new unit or for acquisitions. And sometimes we can combine that with a new unit loan. Let's say you don't have enough equity to fund the whole project, but you've got enough for part of it or a down payment. We can separate the loans to get you to 100% financing. So we do that every day. So if you have a relationship manager through ApplePie, you can reach out to them, or you can send a message to us after this, and we can get you in the right spot to discuss options like that. Ending with the positive plug for ApplePie was not my intent, but it worked out well that way. Listen, this has been a really great discussion. I don't want to.
I'm sure you picked that question by design.
There was 3 that were similar in nature, so it actually worked out great. But yeah, it was somewhat intentional. So thank you for whoever asked the question. But yes, thank you. This was a very great conversation. I appreciate Jiger. I appreciate your flexibility being in the hot seat for a full hour and not having a counterpart to fill some of the time. You gave us a lot of excellent information. And for the folks that asked questions in the chat that we didn't answer yet, we have all of those. So I myself or someone else from our team will make sure that we get those answers to you in the next couple of days. And we greatly appreciate everybody spending an hour with us. Jiger, I know your time is super valuable, and we can't thank you enough for filling in and spending this time with us. So look for some invites in the next couple of months. We do this quarterly. So if you guys enjoyed it, join next time as well.
Great. Thank you. Take care.
And that's it. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.